In the heart of Atlanta, a single moment of tension sets the stage for a story of transformation. Judge Olivia Moore, poised and accomplished, encounters Officer Mark Jenkins, a man grappling with bitterness and the weight of his own mistakes. What begins as a confrontation outside a courthouse unravels into a deeper exploration of redemption, kindness, and the power of second chances. As lives unexpectedly intersect at a humble community center, the walls come alive with hope, and a mural becomes the symbol of a community's resilience. Through mentorship, healing, and small but profound acts of kindness, Olivia and Mark find themselves not just reshaping their own lives, but also the lives of those around them, especially Tyler, a young boy searching for his place in the world. But change is never easy. Each of them must confront their pasts, navigate personal challenges, and discover the strength that comes from connection. Will Olivia's belief in justice evolve into something greater? Can Mark find redemption and rebuild trust? And how will a boy's quiet creativity inspire a movement of hope that reaches far beyond a single mural? The sun blazed relentlessly over Atlanta's bustling downtown streets. Judge Olivia Moore stepped out of her car, her polished heels clicking against the pavement as she adjusted her leather briefcase. Her day was tightly packed, with hearings stacked back to back. Being one of the youngest federal appointees in the state's history carried its weight. Every decision was scrutinized and every misstep magnified. Her career, though successful, often felt like a lonely climb up a steep mountain. As she approached the courthouse steps, Olivia felt a growing sense of dread, not for the legal challenges ahead, but for the mounting weight of public perception. Her profession demanded perfection, yet her personal life had become a shadow. She missed the warmth of friendships, but her title often intimidated people. A voice pierced the air. "Ma'am!" Olivia stopped mid-step and turned. A tall officer, his badge catching the sunlight, strode toward her. His tone was sharp, his sunglasses concealing his eyes. "This is a restricted parking zone," he said, gesturing toward her car. Olivia straightened. "I am aware. I am here for a meeting and will not be long," she replied evenly, already fishing her ID from her bag. "Court meeting, huh?" he said with a smirk. "Let me see some ID, and while you are at it, pop open that briefcase." Her heart sank. She had seen this kind of behavior before, a power trip disguised as procedure. Still, Olivia held her composure. "Officer," she began calmly, "I am not under suspicion. I do not believe this is necessary." The man folded his arms. "Either you comply, or we take this downtown. Your choice." Olivia felt the heat of onlookers' gazes. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over her ID. He barely glanced at it before pressing her again about her briefcase. "I am a judge," Olivia said firmly, now drawing her phone, "and I believe this interaction is inappropriate." She dialed her superior. Moments later, a black SUV screeched to a halt. Out stepped Chief Hendrick, a man Olivia respected for his no-nonsense demeanor. His face was unreadable as he addressed the officer. "What's going on here, Jenkins?" Mark Jenkins, the officer, shifted uncomfortably. She was parked in a restricted zone. "I asked for ID and to inspect her belongings." Hendrick's gaze turned cold. "This is Judge Olivia Moore, our state's newest federal appointee." Mark's face turned ashen. Olivia, despite her growing frustration, felt no satisfaction in his visible discomfort. "Your Honor," Hendrick said, turning to her. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Olivia said curtly, "but this behavior is unacceptable." Hendrick acted swiftly, suspending Mark on the spot. The crowd murmured as he handed over his badge and weapon. Olivia walked up the courthouse steps, her dignity intact, but her heart heavy. That evening, Olivia sat in her modest apartment. It was sparsely decorated, reflecting her pragmatic lifestyle. The view from her window overlooked the city she served, but tonight, The lights blurred through the tears in her eyes. She thought about Jenkins, his actions, his anger, and the humiliation he had suffered. She had seen countless faces in her courtroom, but this was different. Mark Jenkins was not just another name in a case file. He was someone whose bitterness hinted at a deeper struggle. Mark sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. His suspension was a blow not just to his pride, but to his ability to provide for his 10-year-old son, Tyler. The boy was his world, his only family. Losing his job felt like losing everything. Tyler had been quiet lately, battling bullies at school. Mark had always told him to stand tall and never let anyone push him around. But now, as he stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, he wondered if he had let his bitterness consume him. Mark sighed and leaned back. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to pick up the pieces. The following morning, Olivia arrived at the local community center. A colleague had invited her to volunteer at a youth program. She had hesitated at first, unsure if it was the right fit, but something inside her told her to give it a chance. The center was vibrant, filled with the sound of children's laughter and the hum of activity. Olivia felt an odd sense of peace as she signed in. "Good morning, ma'am," a kind voice greeted her. She turned to see an older man with a warm smile. He wore a janitor's uniform, his name tag reading Joe Bennett. His face bore the lines of hard work and wisdom. "First time here?" he asked. "Yes," Olivia admitted. "I am here to help with the tutoring program." Joe chuckled. "Good for you. These kids need all the kindness they can get." As Olivia settled into the program, she found herself working with a shy boy named Tyler. His messy hair and quiet demeanor reminded her of herself at that age. Tyler struggled with math, but his sketchbook, filled with imaginative drawings, revealed a budding artist. "You have real talent," Olivia said, handing back his sketchbook. Tyler's eyes lit up. "You think so?" "I know so," she replied with a smile. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt a connection. Later that week, Mark walked into the community center, his steps hesitant. The part-time security job he had reluctantly accepted felt like a demotion. Seeing his son sitting with Olivia Moore was a shock. Mark watched from a distance as Tyler laughed, a sound he had not heard in weeks. Olivia was kind to Tyler, helping him with his homework and encouraging his art. "Hey," Joe said, appearing beside Mark. "That woman is something else. She has a way of bringing out the best in people." Mark nodded, his throat tight. He felt a flicker of something he had not felt in years' hope. As the days passed, Olivia and Mark began to cross paths more often. Their conversations were brief and polite, but the wall between them began to crack. Olivia saw a man trying to rebuild his life, and Mark saw a woman who genuinely cared about his son. One evening, as Olivia left the center, Joe stopped her. "You have a gift," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You see people for who they are, not just what they have done. Keep doing that, and you will change more lives than you know." Olivia drove home that night, Joe's words echoing in her mind. She had spent so long judging people from a distance. Perhaps it was time to step closer. Olivia found herself returning to the community center every afternoon that week. The hum of children's voices, the squeak of sneakers on the gym floor, and the occasional burst of laughter felt like a balm she had not realized she needed. She was drawn to the sense of life the place exuded, a stark contrast to the cold formality of her courtroom. It had only been a few days since the encounter with Officer Jenkins. She caught herself thinking about him more often than she cared to admit. His bitterness had felt so personal, yet the brief glimpses she had seen since hinted at a man burdened by his own struggles. "Hey, Ms. Moore," Tyler's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see him holding up his math workbook. "Look, I got all the answers right." "That's fantastic, Tyler," she said, smiling warmly. Tyler grinned back. "I think math is starting to make sense now. You're a good teacher." Olivia felt a swell of pride. "You did the work, Tyler. I just helped you see how." He hesitated, then added, I like coming here. It's better than being at school. Why do you say that? Tyler shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, but his eyes gave him away. The kids at school, they're not nice. Olivia knelt to his level. I'm sorry to hear that. You know, when I was your age, I had trouble with some kids too. But I learned something important. Being kind to yourself is just as important as standing up for yourself. You're stronger than you think. Her words seemed to sink in. Tyler nodded, though he did not say more. Mark sat in the security office at the community center, watching the camera feeds. He hated this job. Every creak of the chair, every hum of the monitors reminded him of how far he had fallen. He had gone from being a respected officer to babysitting an empty hallway. But when Tyler bounded into the office that afternoon, his face lit up with excitement. Mark's mood shifted. Hey, Dad, look, Tyler said, holding up a colorful sketch. Miss Moore said I should enter this in the art contest next week. She said it's really good. Mark stared at the drawing. It was a scene of a lighthouse on a rocky shore, its beam cutting through stormy skies. He was stunned by the detail, the way the waves seemed to crash right off the page. This is incredible, buddy, Mark said, ruffling Tyler's hair. You think so? I know so. You should definitely enter it. For the first time in weeks, Mark saw a spark in his son that had been missing. It filled him with both joy and guilt. Joy, because Tyler was finding his confidence. Guilt, because he knew he had not been the father Tyler needed lately. Later that evening, Olivia lingered after the tutoring session ended, tidying up the classroom. Joe Bennett appeared in the doorway, carrying a mop and bucket. You're still here? He asked, his voice warm and amused. I thought I would clean up a bit before heading out, Olivia replied. Joe chuckled. You're too polite, Ms. Moore. That's my job. She smiled and set down the papers she was organizing. You do so much for this place, Joe. I just wanted to pitch in a little. Joe leaned on his mop. You know, kindness like that doesn't go unnoticed. I've seen a lot of people come and go here. You're different. Olivia looked at him, caught off guard. What makes you say that? Most people see these kids and think they're just problems waiting to happen. But you see potential. That's rare. His words warmed her. I just want to help, she said softly. You are, Joe said simply, and you're helping more than you know. The next day, as Olivia was leaving the center, she noticed Mark standing by the door, his face drawn with fatigue. It was the first time they had spoken since the incident outside the courthouse. Good evening, Officer Jenkins, she said, her tone neutral. Not an officer anymore, he replied, a hint of bitterness in his voice. There was a pause, and then he added, I just wanted to thank you for helping Tyler. He talks about you all the time. I don't know what you said to him, but it's made a difference. Olivia was surprised by his vulnerability. Tyler is a wonderful boy, she said. He has so much talent and potential. It's a privilege to work with him. Mark hesitated, then said, You don't have to do this, you know. Spend your time here. You've got other things, bigger things, to focus on. Olivia's gaze softened. Maybe. But sometimes the biggest impact comes from the smallest actions. Mark nodded, though he looked unconvinced. Well, thanks anyway. It means a lot. As he walked away, Olivia felt a strange sense of hope. Perhaps there was more to Mark Jenkins than the anger she had seen before. That weekend, Olivia stopped by a local cafe. She was catching up on some case files when a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Judge Moore. She looked up to see Joe Bennett, a cup of coffee in hand. He approached her table with his ever-present smile. Joe, what a nice surprise, she said. Mind if I join you? Not at all. Joe sat down, his expression more serious than usual. I wanted to say something. I've been watching you at the center, and I think you're doing more good than you realize. Not just for the kids, but for folks like Mark, too. Olivia frowned. I'm not sure Mark would agree with that. Joe laughed softly. Maybe not yet, but give him time. That man's been through a lot. Losing his wife, raising Tyler alone, then getting suspended, it's enough to harden anyone. But I see cracks in that armor of his. And you? You're the reason those cracks are showing. Olivia was silent for a moment, digesting his words. I don't know if I'm doing enough. Joe shook his head. Don't sell yourself short. Kindness has a way of rippling out. You may not see it, but the impact is there. As Olivia walked to her car that evening, she thought about Joe's words. She had come to the center looking for a way to bridge the gap between her role as a judge and her desire to help people directly. But now, it felt like the center was changing her as much as she was helping to change others. Mark, meanwhile, was at home, watching Tyler sketch at the kitchen table. His son's face was lit with concentration, his pencil moving furiously across the page. Mark marveled at how much Tyler had grown in just a few weeks. Hey, buddy, he said, breaking the silence. You've been spending a lot of time with Miss Moore. What do you think of her? Tyler looked up, smiling. She's nice. She believes in me. Mark felt a pang in his chest. That's good, he said softly. He glanced at the clock. It was late, but he did not have the heart to tell Tyler to stop drawing. Instead, he sat down beside him, quietly watching as the lines on the paper transformed into something beautiful. Mark Jenkins sat in the dimly lit security office of the community center, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand. The hum of the air conditioner and the occasional buzz of the fluorescent light overhead were his only companions. The room was sparse, a far cry from the precinct where he once worked, a place he had considered his second home. He had replayed Chief Hendrick's words 1,000 times in his head. This department has no room for such conduct. The memory stung as much as the day it happened. Losing his badge was more than just a professional setback. It was an identity crisis. Mark had been an officer for over a decade. Without the uniform, he felt unmoored, unsure of who he was or what he could be. A knock on the door broke his spiral of self-pity. Tyler peeked in, his face bright with excitement. Dad! Miss Moore said I could stay late to work on my art for the contest. Can I? Mark managed a smile. Of course, buddy. Just stick close to the main room, okay? Okay, Tyler chirped before running off. Mark leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. His son's happiness had been the one constant in this storm of a year. Yet he knew Tyler had endured more than his fair share of hardships, losing his mother at a young age, moving schools, and now dealing with bullies. Tyler deserved better, and Mark felt a deep ache knowing he had fallen short of providing it. In the art room, Olivia watched as Tyler worked on his sketch with intense focus. His lighthouse scene had evolved, now featuring a small figure standing on the shore, staring up at the beacon's light. That's a nice addition, Olivia said, gesturing toward the figure. Tyler looked up, his cheeks flushing. I thought it needed something, like someone finding their way. Olivia's chest tightened. That's beautiful, Tyler. You're telling a story with your art. Tyler grinned shyly and went back to shading the waves. Olivia stayed beside him, offering small suggestions here and there, but mostly letting him take the lead. She could not help but marvel at the depth of his imagination and the quiet resilience he carried. Later that evening, Mark stood near the main entrance, waiting for Tyler to finish. Olivia approached, her blazer folded neatly over her arm. Good evening, Mark, she said, her voice calm but warm. Evening, Judge, he replied, his tone hesitant. You can call me Olivia, she said, offering a small smile. Mark nodded, though he seemed uncertain. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again. Tyler really likes working with you. He talks about you all the time. Olivia tilted her head. He's an incredible kid. I feel lucky to know him. Mark shifted on his feet, his gaze dropping to the floor. You're doing more for him than I have lately. He stopped, unsure how to finish. Olivia studied him for a moment. She could see the weight he carried, the guilt and frustration etched into his expression. "You're here, Mark," she said softly. "That's what matters to him. Being present counts more than you realize." Mark looked at her, surprised by the kindness in her tone. For a long time, he had felt like everyone around him was judging him, his actions, his failures. But Olivia's words felt genuine, free of the condescension he had come to expect. "Thanks," he said finally. Olivia nodded, sensing he needed space. "Good night, Mark." "Good night, Olivia." As the days passed, Mark found himself paying closer attention to the community center's activities. He had always thought of it as a place for kids to burn off energy after school, but he began to see how much it offered tutoring, art programs, and mentorship. One afternoon, Joe Bennett stopped by the security office with a thermos of coffee. "Thought you could use a refill," Joe said, setting the thermos on the desk. "Thanks," Mark said, pouring himself a fresh cup. Joe leaned against the doorframe, his usual easy smile in place. "You know, you remind me of myself a few years back." Mark raised an eyebrow. "How's that?" Joe chuckled. "Stubborn, angry, convinced the world was out to get me." Mark smirked despite himself. "Sounds about right." "But you know what snapped me out of it?" Joe continued. "What's that?" "Kindness," Joe said simply. "People who saw more in me than I saw in myself. People like Olivia. She's got that knack, you know." Mark nodded, his thoughts drifting to Olivia. He could not deny that her presence had started to shift something in him. Her patience with Tyler, her willingness to see past his rough edges, it all felt unexpected. Joe clapped him on the shoulder. "Keep your head up, Mark. You're not as far gone as you think." That evening, Mark found himself sketching out a plan for his future, a rare act of hopefulness. He had avoided thinking about what came next, afraid of facing the reality that his career in law enforcement might be over. But tonight felt different. He wrote down 3 goals: reapply for his badge, be a better father to Tyler, volunteer at the community center. The last goal surprised him, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The center had been a lifeline for Tyler, and, in a way, for him too. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in her apartment, reviewing a case file, but her thoughts kept drifting to the community center. She realized how much the place had come to mean to her. It was more than just a way to give back. It was a space where she felt connected to something larger than herself. She thought about Mark and Tyler, the quiet resilience they both carried. Olivia had always believed in the power of justice, but her time at the center was teaching her something new: the power of grace. The following day, Mark arrived at the center early. He found Olivia in the art room, helping a group of kids prepare for the upcoming contest. "Morning," he said, his voice tentative. "Morning," Olivia replied, glancing up with a smile. "I was wondering," Mark began, "if there's anything I can do to help with the contest. You know, behind the scenes." Olivia blinked, surprised. "That's very generous of you, Mark." He shrugged. "Figured it's time I stopped just standing around." Olivia's smile widened. "We could always use an extra set of hands." As they worked together that morning, Olivia saw a different side of Mark, one that was thoughtful, determined, and quietly hopeful. For the first time, she believed he might truly turn things around. That evening, Tyler sat at the kitchen table, putting the finishing touches on his lighthouse drawing. Mark watched from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride. "Looks great, buddy," he said. Tyler grinned. "Thanks, Dad." Mark hesitated, then added, "You know, you're my light, Tyler. Even when things get dark, you keep me going." Tyler looked up, his eyes shining. "You're my light too, Dad." In that moment, Mark felt something shift. He was no longer defined by his mistakes or his anger. He was a father, a protector, and slowly but surely, a man finding his way back to himself. The morning of the art contest was crisp and bright, the kind of day that carried a promise of possibility. Tyler sat in the back seat of Mark's car, nervously clutching his sketchpad. The drive to the community center was unusually quiet, save for the sound of the engine and Tyler's occasional fidgeting. "You okay back there, buddy?" Mark asked, glancing at his son in the rearview mirror. Tyler nodded quickly, though his tight grip on the sketchpad betrayed his anxiety. "What if they don't like it?" Mark smiled softly. "It's not about them liking it. It's about you being proud of what you made. And for the record, I think it's amazing." Tyler's face brightened slightly. "You really think so?" "Absolutely," Mark said, his voice steady. "You've got more talent in your pinky finger than I ever had." At the community center, Olivia was bustling between tables, helping the kids set up their artwork. Each child had a designated spot, complete with a small placard bearing their name and the title of their piece. When Tyler arrived, Olivia greeted him with a warm smile. "There you are. I've been waiting to see the finished masterpiece." Tyler hesitated, then handed her the sketchpad. His drawing of the lighthouse had evolved into a stunning composition, complete with stormy waves, a radiant beam of light, and a solitary figure on the shore. "Tyler, this is incredible," Olivia said, her voice filled with genuine awe. "You've captured so much emotion in this piece. It's like the lighthouse is alive." Tyler beamed, a mix of pride and relief washing over him. Olivia guided him to his spot and helped him place the drawing on display. Mark watched from a distance, leaning against the wall. Seeing Tyler stand tall, his work displayed for all to see, filled him with an overwhelming sense of pride. For the first time in a long while, he felt like they were moving forward together. The art contest began with a short speech from Joe Bennett, who served as the master of ceremonies. His words were simple but heartfelt, emphasizing the importance of creativity and self-expression. As the judges moved from table to table, examining each piece, Tyler stood beside his drawing, his fingers twitching with nervous energy. Olivia stayed close, offering quiet encouragement. When the results were announced, Tyler's name was called as the winner of the Most Inspirational Award. The room erupted in applause, and Tyler's face lit up with pure joy. He ran to the front to accept his ribbon, clutching it tightly as if it were a treasure. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Mark found Olivia near the refreshment table. "I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "for everything you've done for Tyler and for me." Olivia smiled. "Tyler earned that award. All I did was encourage him to believe in himself." "Well, you did more than that," Mark said. He hesitated, then added, "You made me believe in myself too. I haven't felt this hopeful in a long time." Olivia's gaze softened. "You've always had it in you, Mark. Sometimes it just takes someone else to help you see it." That evening, Tyler proudly hung his ribbon on the wall of their small apartment. He placed his lighthouse drawing in a frame, setting it on the table where it could be seen from every corner of the room. "Looks good, doesn't it?" Mark said, standing beside him. Tyler nodded. "It looks perfect." Mark put a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Tyler, not just for winning, but for putting yourself out there. That takes real courage." Tyler looked up at his father, his eyes shining. "I learned that from you, Dad." Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're a good kid, buddy. Better than I deserve." "You're a good dad," Tyler replied firmly. The next day, Mark arrived at the community center early. He had been thinking about Olivia's words about the power of believing in yourself. For the first time in months, he felt ready to take a step toward rebuilding his life. He found Joe sweeping the front steps and approached him with a determined expression. "Hey, Joe," Mark began. "I was wondering if you had time to talk." "Always," Joe said, leaning on his broom. "I've been thinking about volunteering here," Mark said. "Not just working security, but really helping out. I want to give back, the way you and Olivia have. Joe's face lit up with approval. That's a great idea, Mark. You've got a lot to offer this place, and you'll be surprised at how much it gives back to you. Olivia, meanwhile, was preparing to present a proposal to the board of the community center. Inspired by her experiences with Tyler and the other kids, she wanted to start a mentorship program that paired professionals with youth in need of guidance. As she reviewed her notes, she felt a sense of purpose she had not experienced in years. The center had become more than just a volunteer commitment. It was a place where she could make a tangible difference. That evening, the community center held a small celebration for the contest participants. Mark, Olivia, and Joe found themselves sitting together, watching as the kids played games and shared snacks. You know, Joe said, breaking the comfortable silence, this place has a way of bringing people together. Olivia nodded. It's a special place. Mark glanced at Tyler, who was laughing with his newfound friends. It's more than special. It's life-changing. Joe raised his cup of coffee in a mock toast. Here's to second chances. To second chances, Olivia echoed, clinking her water bottle against his cup. Mark hesitated for a moment, then joined in. To second chances. That night, as Olivia drove home, she thought about the journey she had been on since that fateful encounter with Mark. What had started as an uncomfortable confrontation had blossomed into something beautiful, a reminder of the power of kindness, connection, and hope. For Mark, the day felt like the first chapter of a new story, one where he could finally move forward. And for Tyler, it was a day that proved he was capable of greatness. The week after the art contest felt lighter somehow, like a cloud had lifted over the lives of those connected to the community center. Tyler carried himself with more confidence, proudly displaying his most inspirational ribbon to anyone who asked, or even those who did not. Mark, too, felt the difference. For the first time in years, he was beginning to believe he could be more than the sum of his mistakes. He had started volunteering in small ways, helping set up events, assisting with the kids' programs, and even offering advice to parents who came through the doors looking overwhelmed. But despite the progress, there was one fence that still needed mending. One evening, as Olivia was tidying up after a tutoring session, Mark found her in the empty art room. He hesitated in the doorway, watching as she carefully stacked supplies on a shelf. "Hey," he said finally, his voice uncertain. Olivia turned, surprised, but not unwelcoming. "Mark, hi. Everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," he said, stepping into the room. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his gaze darting to the floor. I wanted to talk to you." Olivia set down the stack of papers she was holding. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Mark took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened outside the courthouse, about how I treated you." Her expression softened, but she remained quiet, giving him space to speak. "I was wrong," Mark said, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "I let my frustration and bitterness get the better of me. I saw you as someone who had everything together, someone who couldn't possibly understand what it's like to struggle. But that wasn't fair, and it wasn't true." Olivia nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that, Mark. It means a lot." He met her eyes, his own filled with sincerity. "You didn't deserve how I treated you. I was so caught up in my own anger that I didn't stop to think about who you are or what you've been through. And I'm sorry." Olivia took a step closer, her voice gentle. "Apologies take courage, Mark. I can see how much you've changed since then, and for what it's worth, I forgive you." Relief washed over his face, though he still looked hesitant. "You've been so good to Tyler, and to me, even when I didn't deserve it. I'll never forget that." Olivia smiled. "Tyler's an incredible kid. He's a big part of the reason I come here every day. And as for you, Mark deserve has nothing to do with it. Kindness is about seeing the good in people, even when they can't see it in themselves." Mark's throat tightened, but he managed a nod. Thank you." The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. The tension that had once lingered between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a growing sense of mutual respect. The following week, Olivia presented her mentorship program proposal to the community center board. Mark, having heard about her idea from Joe, volunteered to speak in support of the program. "I used to think mentorship was just about teaching people how to do things," Mark said during the meeting. "But after spending time here, I've realized it's so much more than that. It's about showing people that they matter, that they have something to offer the world. This program could change lives not just for the kids, but for everyone involved." The board members nodded thoughtfully, and Olivia felt a surge of gratitude. Mark's words carried a weight that hers could not, coming from someone who had walked a harder path. When the board approved the program, Olivia and Mark exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They were partners now, working toward the same goal. That weekend, the community center held an open house to recruit mentors for the new program. Mark and Olivia worked side by side, greeting attendees and sharing stories about the center's impact. Mark was surprised by how natural it felt to talk about his experiences. He spoke openly about his mistakes and the lessons he had learned, and people listened with genuine interest. "You're a natural at this," Olivia said during a quiet moment. Mark laughed. "I never would have guessed, but it feels good, like I'm finally doing something that matters." Olivia's smile was warm. "You are." As the event wound down, Tyler approached Mark with an excited grin. "Dad, guess what?" he said, holding up a flyer. "They're starting a new mural project at the center, and Miss Moore said I could help design it." Mark's eyes lit up. "That's amazing, buddy. What are you going to draw?" "I'm not sure yet," Tyler admitted, "but I want it to be about hope, like how the lighthouse in my drawing helped people find their way." Mark ruffled his son's hair, pride swelling in his chest. "That sounds perfect." That evening, as Olivia locked up the center, Joe caught up with her in the parking lot. "Big day," he said, his tone cheerful. "It was," Olivia agreed. "I think the program is going to make a real difference." Joe nodded, then gave her a knowing look. "You and Mark make a good team." Olivia chuckled. "We're still figuring it out, but yeah, I think so." Joe's smile widened. "Keep at it. This place has a way of turning strangers into family." As Olivia drove home, she reflected on Joe's words. She had started this journey hoping to make a difference in the community, but she realized now that the community was changing her as well. For Mark, the day had been a revelation. He had spent so much time focusing on what he had lost: his badge, his sense of purpose, that he had overlooked what he still had. As he sat at the kitchen table that night, watching Tyler sketch out ideas for the mural, he felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. He was not just rebuilding his life, he was building something new, something better. The mentorship program had barely begun, but the community center buzzed with newfound energy. Volunteers of all ages filtered in, bringing fresh ideas and a contagious sense of purpose. Olivia's proposal had sparked a chain reaction, and it felt as though the entire neighborhood was rallying together. For Olivia, seeing her vision come to life was deeply rewarding. But as she watched Mark guide a group of teenagers through a conflict resolution exercise, she realized the program had grown beyond what she had imagined. It was not just about providing mentorship, it was about creating connections. Late one afternoon, as the center emptied for the day, Olivia lingered in the art room. She was organizing the leftover supplies when Joe walked in, his mop in hand. "You're still here?" he asked with a grin. Olivia laughed softly. "I guess I've gotten used to staying late." Joe leaned the mop against the wall and pulled up a chair. "Mind if I sit for a bit? These old bones could use a break." "Of course," Olivia said, pulling out a chair for herself. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of the building settling around them. "You know, I've been working here a long time," Joe began, his voice thoughtful. Seen a lot of people come and go, but something feels different now. Olivia tilted her head. What do you mean? Joe smiled. It's like this place has found its heart again, and I think you had a lot to do with that. Olivia shook her head. I'm just one person, Joe. It's the community that's making this happen. That may be true, Joe said, but every ripple starts somewhere. You set something in motion, Olivia, and now it's reaching people in ways you may never see. His words settled over her like a warm blanket. She had always believed in the power of justice, but Joe's perspective added a new layer to her understanding. Meanwhile, Mark was in the security office, reviewing a list of potential mentors for the program. His role had evolved quickly. He was no longer just a volunteer, but a key organizer. It was a responsibility he took seriously, though it still felt strange to be in a position of leadership again. As he worked, Tyler poked his head in. Dad, can I show you something? Mark looked up, smiling. Of course, buddy. What's up? Tyler stepped inside, holding a large piece of paper. On it was a sketch of a mural design, a tree with roots that extended deep into the ground, surrounded by smaller trees growing upward toward a bright sun. It's for the mural project, Tyler explained. The big tree is supposed to be like the community center, and the little trees are all the people it helps. Mark stared at the drawing, his chest tightening. Tyler, this is incredible. It's perfect. Tyler beamed. You think they'll pick it? I know they will, Mark said, ruffling his son's hair. And even if they don't, I'm proud of you for putting yourself out there. That evening, as Olivia was leaving the center, she found Mark waiting by the entrance. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, Mark said, stepping closer. I just wanted to thank you again for believing in me and for starting this program. It's giving me a chance to do something good again. Olivia smiled. You're the one making it happen, Mark. I just gave you a nudge. Mark hesitated, then said, You know, I never really understood what Joe meant when he talked about kindness being a ripple. But I see it now. You helped Tyler, and that helped me. And now I get to pass that on to these kids. It's like we're all connected somehow. Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? None of us can do it alone, but together we can create something bigger than ourselves. The next day, Joe called a staff meeting for the mentors and volunteers. He stood at the front of the room, his weathered hands resting on the podium. I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you, he began. This place has always been special to me, but lately it's become something even more. It's become a home not just for the kids, but for all of us. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. When I was younger, I made a lot of mistakes. Spent years feeling angry at the world, thinking I'd been dealt a bad hand. But then someone showed me kindness when I didn't deserve it. That kindness saved me, and it's why I'm standing here today. The room was silent, every pair of eyes fixed on Joe. That's what we're doing here, he continued. We're planting seeds of kindness, seeds of hope. We may not see the fruits of our labor right away, but they're there, growing. And one day, they'll change lives in ways we can't even imagine. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Olivia glanced at Mark, who was clapping along with the others. Their eyes met, and for a moment, nothing needed to be said. Later that evening, Olivia found herself reflecting on Joe's words. She thought about her journey, how it had started with a moment of confrontation and grown into something transformative. For Mark, the speech resonated deeply. He had spent so long defining himself by his failures that he had forgotten his capacity to inspire others. But now, he saw himself in a new light. He was not just a father or a former officer. He was a mentor, a role model, and a part of something larger. That night, as Tyler worked on his mural design, Mark sat beside him, sketching his own ideas. They shared quiet moments of collaboration, their pencils moving in harmony. "What are you drawing, Dad?" Tyler asked. peeking at his father's paper. Mark held up his sketch. It was a simple image of a hand reaching down to lift another hand. "It's about helping each other," Mark said, "because that's what this place is all about." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I like that." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. The community center was alive with activity as the mural project officially began. Volunteers of all ages gathered in the main hall, excited to bring Tyler's design to life. The large wall selected for the mural was freshly primed, its blank expanse brimming with potential. Tyler stood at the front of the group, his sketch in hand. He had been chosen to lead the project, and though his nerves were evident, his excitement overshadowed them. "Okay," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "The big tree goes in the middle. The little trees go around it, with the sun at the top." Mark watched from the sidelines, pride glowing in his chest. Seeing Tyler take charge of something so significant was a reminder of how far they had come. Olivia arrived mid-morning, carrying a tray of snacks for the volunteers. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Tyler was directing the group with quiet confidence, while Mark worked alongside a group of teenagers, helping them mix paint. "Looking good in here," Olivia said, setting the tray on a nearby table. Mark glanced up, smiling. "It's coming together. Tyler's doing a great job." Olivia nodded, her gaze softening as she watched Tyler. "He's found his voice. That's a big deal." Mark's expression grew thoughtful. "It is. And it's not just him. This place has changed me too. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm part of something that matters." Olivia looked at him, sensing the depth of his words. "You are, Mark, and so is Tyler. This mural will be a reminder of that for everyone who walks through these doors." As the day went on, the mural began to take shape. The central tree, with its deep roots and strong branches, emerged as a symbol of stability and growth. Around it, the smaller trees and the vibrant sun brought the design to life. Joe wandered in during the afternoon, leaning on his mop handle as he surveyed the progress. "Looks like a masterpiece in the making," he said with a grin. Tyler beamed. "Do you like it, Mr. Joe?" "Like it?" Joe said, his eyes twinkling. "I love it. You've captured what this place is all about." Tyler's grin widened, and he went back to directing the volunteers. Joe turned to Olivia and Mark, his tone more serious. "You two should be proud of what you've started here. This mural, it's more than just paints on a wall. It's a reminder that we all have a part to play." Olivia smiled. "It feels like the community is coming together in a way I've never seen before." Joe nodded. "That's what happens when you plant the right seeds. It takes time, but eventually, they grow into something beautiful." Over the next few days, the mural continued to evolve. Mark spent long hours at the center, helping with the finer details of the design and guiding the teenagers who had volunteered to paint. One afternoon, as the mural neared completion, a boy named Jordan approached Mark. Jordan was one of the quieter kids at the center, often lingering on the edges of the group. "Mr. Jenkins?" Jordan said hesitantly. "Hey, Jordan," Mark replied, setting down his paintbrush. "What's up?" Jordan looked down, scuffing his shoe against the floor. "I just wanted to say thanks for talking to me the other day. It helped." Mark frowned, trying to recall the conversation. Then he remembered. A few days earlier, Jordan had been upset after an argument with a friend. Mark had pulled him aside and talked him through it, sharing some advice about handling conflict. "I'm glad I could help," Mark said, his voice gentle. Jordan hesitated, then added, "I never really had anyone to talk to before. But you listened. That meant a lot." Mark's throat tightened. "Any time, Jordan. I mean that." Jordan nodded and walked back to the mural, his posture a little straighter. That evening, Mark sat at the kitchen table with Tyler, reviewing the final sketch for the mural. "You know," Mark said, "this mural isn't just about the center. It's about you, too." Tyler looked up, confused. What do you mean? You're the one who brought this idea to life, Mark said. You had the courage to share your vision, and now it's bringing people together. That's a big deal, Tyler. Tyler blushed, but his smile was unmistakable. I just wanted it to mean something. Mark reached over and ruffled his son's hair. It does, more than you know. On the day of the mural's unveiling, the community center was packed with people. Parents, kids, volunteers, and even local officials had gathered to celebrate the project's completion. The mural, now fully painted and sealed, stood as a vibrant testament to the strength of the community. Joe stepped up to the microphone first, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. This mural isn't just a decoration, he began. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together. Each tree represents a life touched by this center, and each branch represents the connections we've built. It's a reminder that we're all part of something bigger. The crowd erupted in applause, and Joe stepped back, gesturing for Tyler to come forward. Tyler hesitated, looking to Mark for reassurance. You've got this, buddy, Mark said, giving him a thumbs up. Tyler approached the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. Hi, he began. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who helped with the mural. It was just an idea at first, but now it's real, and I hope it reminds everyone that we're stronger when we help each other. The applause that followed was deafening, and Tyler's face lit up with pride. As the crowd dispersed, Mark and Olivia stood side by side, watching as people admired the mural. You did good, Mark, Olivia said. Mark smiled, his eyes on Tyler. We all did. The mural was more than just an art project. It reflected the community's journey, a journey of resilience, growth, and connection. For Mark, it was a reminder that second chances were possible. For Olivia, it was proof that even small acts of kindness could create lasting change. And for Tyler, it was the beginning of a brighter future. The glow of the mural unveiling lingered in the air for days, a ripple of pride and joy spreading through the community. The mural had become a symbol of resilience, its vibrant colors and intricate design drawing admiration from all who visited the center. For Mark, it was more than a symbol. It was a turning point. He had spent years feeling defined by his mistakes, but the past few weeks had shown him that redemption was possible. The mentorship program, the connections he had made, and Tyler's growing confidence were proof that he could build something meaningful again. Mark stood outside the precinct, staring at the familiar brick facade. It was the first time he had returned since his suspension, and the sight stirred a mix of emotions. He felt a pull of nostalgia for the life he had once led, tempered by the weight of what had happened to bring it crashing down. He straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Chief Hendrick was waiting for him in his office. The older man looked up as Mark entered, his expression unreadable. Jenkins, Hendrick said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Take a seat. Mark sat, his hands resting on his knees. Thank you for seeing me, Chief. Hendrick nodded, leaning back in his chair. I've been hearing some good things about you. Word is, you've been making quite an impact at the community center. Mark felt a flicker of hope. I've been trying, sir. I know I let you down before, but I've been working to rebuild, not just for myself, but for my son and the people I've hurt. Hendrick studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. I believe in second chances, Mark, but you have to prove you've earned it. This department has no room for complacency or shortcuts. If I reinstate you, you'll be on probation, and you'll have to complete additional training in de-escalation and community outreach. Mark's heart leapt, but he kept his composure. I understand, sir, and I'm ready. Hendrick nodded. Good. You start Monday. The news of Mark's reinstatement spread quickly through the community center. When Olivia heard, she sought him out immediately. Congratulations, she said, her smile genuine. Thanks, Mark said, his voice tinged with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without this place or without you. Olivia shook her head. You did the work, Mark. This is your victory. Mark hesitated, then added, I want to keep volunteering, though. The center, it's become a part of me. Olivia's smile widened. I wouldn't expect anything less. Mark's return to the force was not without challenges. His probationary period was rigorous, requiring him to balance his duties as an officer with his commitments at the center. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, he found himself energized by the work. At the precinct, he approached his role with a new perspective. He listened more, took time to understand the communities he served, and leaned on the de-escalation techniques he had learned during his training. At the community center, he became a mentor not just to the kids, but to other volunteers. His story of growth and redemption resonated deeply, inspiring others to believe in their capacity to change. One evening, Mark sat with Tyler in their small living room, reviewing homework. The ribbon Tyler had won hung on the wall beside the framed photo of the mural, a constant reminder of how far they had come. "Dad?" Tyler asked, his voice soft. "Yeah, buddy? I'm proud of you." Mark froze, his throat tightening. "What do you mean?" Tyler looked up, his eyes earnest. "You never gave up, even when it was hard. And now you're helping people again, just like before." Mark reached over and pulled Tyler into a hug, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, Tyler. More than I can ever say." The following week, Mark led a workshop at the community center on conflict resolution. It was the first event he had spearheaded since being reinstated, and the turnout was larger than he had expected. Standing in front of the group, he felt a flicker of nervousness, but then he saw Tyler sitting in the front row, his sketchpad in hand, and the tension eased. Mark began by sharing his story, his mistakes, his suspension, and the lessons he had learned along the way. He spoke about the importance of empathy, the power of listening, and the value of building trust. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Tyler stood, clapping the loudest, his face glowing with pride. That evening, Olivia found Mark sitting on the steps outside the center. The day's events had left him reflective, his thoughts swirling as he stared up at the stars. "Mind if I join you?" Olivia asked, sitting beside him. "Not at all," Mark said, smiling faintly. "You were amazing today," she said. "You've come so far, Mark." Mark nodded, his gaze distant. "It feels different now, like I finally have something to give. For so long, I felt empty, like I didn't deserve a second chance. But this place, these people, they showed me I was wrong." Olivia placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's the power of community. None of us can do it alone, but together, we can lift each other up." Mark looked at her, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," she said. "Just keep paying it forward." Mark nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face them. The mentorship program was thriving, and the mural had become a beloved symbol of the community's resilience. The center's halls were filled with chatter and laughter, a vibrant testament to the work everyone had put in. Olivia walked through the center one evening, observing the bustling activity. Groups of kids worked on projects, mentors chatted with parents, and the energy in the air was palpable. She paused near the mural, running her fingers lightly along the edge of the wall. It was more than just paint. It was a declaration of hope. Her thoughts were interrupted by Joe's voice. "Thinking deep thoughts again, huh?" She turned, smiling as the older man approached. "Something like that." Joe leaned against the wall, his usual easy grin in place. "What's on your mind?" Olivia hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about what this place has taught me. When I became a judge, I thought I was making a difference by enforcing the law, and I was, in a way. But it's here, in this center, that I've seen what real change looks like." Joe nodded, his expression thoughtful. The law has its place, sure. But kindness? Empathy? Those are the things that stick. You've been showing people that, Olivia, whether you realize it or not. Olivia sighed. I just wish there was a way to bring what we've built here into my courtroom. Joe's smile widened. Maybe there is. That night, Olivia sat at her desk, drafting a proposal for a restorative justice program. She envisioned a system that focused on accountability and healing, rather than punishment alone. The idea felt ambitious, but as she typed, she thought of Mark, Tyler, and the countless others who had found redemption through connection and kindness. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, a sense of determination settling over her. This was the next step, the way to bridge her roles as a judge and a mentor. The next morning, Olivia presented her proposal to a panel of judicial colleagues. She spoke with conviction, sharing stories from the community center and emphasizing the transformative power of empathy and support. This isn't about being lenient, she concluded. It's about creating opportunities for growth. For many, a second chance can mean the difference between breaking the cycle and being trapped in it. The room was silent for a moment before one of the judges spoke. It's an ambitious idea, Olivia, but I can see the value in it. Let's discuss implementation. Olivia felt a surge of relief. The first step had been taken. At the community center, Mark was busy preparing for another workshop. The topic this time was trust, how to build it, maintain it, and repair it when it was broken. As he worked, Olivia arrived, her face glowing with excitement. How'd it goes? Mark asked, sensing the good news. They approved the pilot program, Olivia said, barely containing her smile. That's incredible, Mark said, his voice full of pride. I knew you could do it. It's just the beginning, Olivia said, but it feels like the right step. Mark nodded. You're changing the system, Olivia, one step at a time. That evening, Olivia joined Mark and Tyler for dinner at their apartment. It was a simple meal, spaghetti and salad, but the atmosphere was warm and inviting. As they ate, Tyler shared updates on the mural, which had continued to draw visitors from across the city. People keep taking pictures of it, Tyler said, grinning. It's kind of famous now. Mark laughed. It's your masterpiece, buddy. You should be proud. I am, Tyler said. But it's not just mine. Everyone helped make it. Olivia smiled, her heart swelling. That's the beauty of it, Tyler. It's a reflection of the community. Later that night, as Olivia drove home, she reflected on the evening. It had been years since she had felt this kind of connection, this sense of belonging. Her work at the center had given her a new perspective, one that would continue to shape her both personally and professionally. The next week, Olivia invited Mark to join her at the courthouse. She wanted him to see the pilot restorative justice program in action. In the courtroom, a young man named Eric stood before her, charged with vandalism. Instead of delivering a traditional sentence, Olivia outlined a plan for restitution through community service and a mentorship program. Eric, she said, her tone firm but compassionate, you've made a mistake, but mistakes don't define us. What matters is how we move forward. This program is an opportunity for you to rebuild trust and make amends. I hope you take it. Eric nodded, visibly moved. Thank you, Your Honor. I will. Afterward, Mark approached Olivia, his expression thoughtful. That was incredible to watch. You're giving people a real chance. Olivia smiled. It's just the beginning, but it feels right. As they left the courthouse, Olivia turned to Mark. You've been a big part of this, you know? Your story, your growth, it's inspired me more than I can say. Mark looked at her, his voice quiet. You've inspired me too, Olivia. This center, this program, it's changed my life, and I'll never forget that. The community center was buzzing with anticipation. It was the day of the center's annual gala. a celebration of everything they had achieved over the past year. This year's event felt particularly special, with the mural now a symbol of unity and the mentorship program gaining recognition beyond the local community. Olivia arrived early, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress. She carried a small stack of papers, her speech for the evening. As she walked through the center, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The hall was decorated with strings of lights and colorful banners. Tables were set with modest but cheerful centerpieces, and the air buzzed with the chatter of volunteers, parents, and kids. At the center of it all was Tyler's mural, bathed in soft lighting, its vibrant colors glowing like a beacon. Mark was already there, helping Joe set up chairs. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, a change from his usual casual attire. Tyler darted around the room, excitedly greeting friends and showing them the mural. "Looks like a full house tonight," Joe said, wiping his hands on a towel. Mark nodded. "It's amazing to see everyone here. Feels like we've built something real." Joe clapped him on the shoulder. "You have, and tonight's about celebrating that." Mark smiled, his gaze drifting to Tyler. His son had blossomed over the past year, his confidence and creativity growing with every new experience. Seeing Tyler so happy filled Mark with a deep sense of pride. As the guests took their seats, Olivia stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted, all eyes on her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you for being here tonight. This community center has always been a place of connection, growth, and hope. Over the past year, we've seen those values come to life in ways we never imagined." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "The mural behind me is more than just an art project. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together. Each tree represents a life touched by this center, and the roots remind us that our strength comes from supporting one another." The audience erupted into applause, and Olivia smiled, taking a moment before continuing. "We've also seen the power of mentorship," she said. "People like Mark Jenkins have stepped forward to guide others, sharing their experiences and showing us what true growth looks like." Mark's face turned red as the room broke into applause again. He glanced at Tyler, who gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up. "This year, we've proven that second chances matter," Olivia said, "that no mistake defines us, and that kindness can change lives. Let's carry these lessons forward, knowing that together we can create ripples of hope that reach far beyond these walls." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding as Olivia stepped back from the microphone. She felt a rush of emotion, pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of purpose. As the evening unfolded, Olivia found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Parents thanked her for the mentorship program, kids proudly showed off their projects, and volunteers shared their hopes for the future. Mark approached her as the crowd began to thin. "That was a beautiful speech," he said, his voice sincere. "Thank you," Olivia said, "but tonight's about all of us. This place wouldn't be what it is without people like you, Mark." Mark looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about kindness and second chances. For so long, I thought I didn't deserve either. But you showed me I was wrong." Olivia's gaze softened. "You've earned this, Mark, and you're helping others see that they can too." Mark nodded, his voice quiet. "I don't think I ever told you this, but you saved me, Olivia. Not just my career, but me. I was lost, and you helped me find my way back." Her throat tightened, but she managed a smile. "We saved each other, Mark. That's what this place is about, lifting each other up." Later that night, as the gala wound down, Tyler stood by the mural, staring up at his creation. "Pretty amazing, huh?" Mark said, joining him. Tyler nodded. "Do you think it'll still be here in 10 years? "Definitely," Mark said. "And even if it fades, the impact it's had won't go away." Tyler smiled, leaning against his father. "I'm glad we're part of this." "Me too, buddy," Mark said, wrapping an arm around him. As Olivia left the center that night, she paused by the mural, taking one last look before heading home. The tree at the center seemed to glow in the moonlight, its branches stretching outward, like arms reaching for the future. She thought about everything they had accomplished, the lives they had touched, the hope they had inspired. And she knew this was only the beginning, because kindness was not just a ripple, it was a wave, one that could carry them all towards something greater. The story of Olivia, Mark, Tyler, and the community center reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples of hope that grow into waves of change. Their journey shows that resilience, forgiveness, and community can transform lives, proving that no mistake is too great and no person is beyond redemption. This isn't just their story, it's a reflection of what we can achieve when we come together to lift each other up. If this story moved you, consider the ways you can create ripples of kindness in your own community. And if you want to experience more uplifting stories of resilience and hope, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us in spreading messages that inspire and connect. Let's continue to create ripples of change together. Thank you for watching, and remember, every act of kindness matters.